Hi, this is Joe Walensky, and I'm talking with some of the speakers coming up for our ConveyUX conference in February. Today I'm speaking with Alan Baumgarten. Hello, Alan.
How you doing, Joe? Glad to be with you.
Pretty good. Glad to have the chance to talk to you. I'm in my Seattle office. Where are you talking to us from?
Coming from South Lake, Texas, not far from Dallas.
All right. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and the company you work for and the nature of your work?
Well, I've been working as a user experience professional for about 17 years, which makes me, nice and gray in the beard. Back then, we didn't even know what to call ourselves. Information architect was kind of the word that was used back then, and it's evolved a little bit. I started work for an agency, for a web agency, and interactive. We did CDs and things like that, and a lot of what we call now brochureware that started getting more and more interactive as the web evolved in the early 2000s. And a lot of it was consumer oriented. I since and I in 2005 made the move to work for Sabre, which is a company that does automation for the airline industry, for the travel industry. So we have stuff for travel agents, but a lot of IT for airline operations, and just about any IT that an airline would need to operate, Sabre makes it. We have 140 different applications in our portfolio thereabouts. It changes a lot. And this is really pretty heavy duty enterprise stuff. So, and I've been doing that for 10 years. So I've had a background in both the consumer side as well as now the enterprise side. And that's kind of what led to the topics that I've been talking to lately, which is kind of, a look at both of those.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to have you in the conference program, and one of those being that we do want to have a lot of input from people working in with enterprise applications, and Sabre's an organization that's not only a big enterprise in and of itself, but you're intimately tied with supporting some of the biggest enterprises in the world through all the things with travel and the airlines.
It's a huge industry, absolutely.
And but I thought maybe I'd ask you, the next question is. If there's anything that you're particularly passionate about right now, is there anything you've done lately that has you, that you're really interested about, energized about?
Yeah, I think that what really excites me lately is thinking about mobility. We think about mobility usually in terms of people being out in their car or driving around town or something like that. But mobility in the office, for a long time, computers have been kind of stuck in stuck on the desktop, and people have to work at their desks. And if they ever have to leave their desks, they can't really take their information with them. Well, tablets, iPad, and phones as well are kind of, and laptops are kind of making it possible to have a much more mobile work environment. So for that, a lot of the things that are happening in mobile right now, one in particular is Google's material design, can apply directly to office mobility or mobility within the enterprise. And so we're really looking a lot at what kind of applications we're doing that have been traditionally desktop applications and how well they could port to a more mobile environment. Understanding it for many things, you just really need a really large screen space to be able to visualize all of the information. But there are some functions that still lend themselves well. Like in the case of airline, for example, you might have situations where there's a major disruption because of weather or something. So everybody goes into what they call a war room, and they all, every different department has to say, well, here's what I know, and here's what I know, and this is what's happening with catering, and this is with fueling, and et cetera. And so that's a great example of where you need to kind of change to a different environment, but still have all of your capabilities, still have all of your data to make decisions. And I think that there's some things that are happening in mobility on the consumer side that could lend themselves very well to those kind of applications.
Well, you have an interesting title for your topic at the conference. relationship counseling for enterprise software and consumer grade UX. So, why don't you talk a little bit about where your idea came from for this topic, and what some of the things are you're going to be talking about?
Wow, yeah, that's kind of an interesting one. The CEO at Sabre, Tom Klein, started mentioning, oh, we've got to have consumer grade user UX in all of our things, and this idea, this term consumer grade, he started repeating it a lot. And he's a really smart guy, I know he is, but he doesn't know a lot about UX. And I was kind of curious where that term came from. Consumerization of IT has been around for a long time. It's been talked about since 2001, near as I can tell, and articles and things since then. Really, it's really been happening since, I guess, the advent of the personal computer. But anyway, so I went digging. It seems to be that it originated from SAP, of all places, and they're talking about how important it is to have that specific term, consumer grade UX. We've spoken about this. I have a colleague who works at Intel, and he and I spoke about this a lot, and think, is that really appropriate to say that everything that is consumer grade or consumer automatically is appropriate or right for professionals? A case in point, and just for an example, if you're familiar with Don Norman's book, Emotional Design, where he essentially said beautiful things are automatically easier to use because of various human factors, emotional connections. And on the cover of it, he has this lemon juicer. That's this beautiful, like, kind of squid-like looking thing, and it really is a beautiful piece of art. It was in the Museum of Modern Art. And I thought about that, and Ben and I talked about this, my colleague at Intel, and we talked about this and said, well, okay, that's great to have this beautiful lemon juicer, but what if you're Tropicana and you need to juice 10,000 tons of oranges every day? No matter how beautiful or how wonderful this one device is for this specific purpose, there are other cases where you need to do industrial kind of work, serious industrial kind of work, to where this device that's wonderful and beautiful and was in the Museum of Modern Arts is completely inadequate, would never get the job done. So what are the things that make an industrial juicer the size of a big room? What are the kind of things that make for great design for that kind of a thing? And it turns out to be things like efficiency, turns out to be things like reliability, the cleanliness. You're going to have absolutely sterile, kind of conditions so you don't contaminate the product. And a lot of other kind of things that really you don't have to think about very much when you're thinking about the consumer side of having a lemon juicer. Mm-hmm. And I think that maybe you can stretch that metaphor one way or another, but I think it's a good, at least, starting point to think about whether or not everything that happens on the consumer side for IT automatically is better and automatically is appropriate for professionals who use software. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to dig into that a little bit, and so you get this kind of unhappy relationship. That's where the relationship part comes in. You get this unhappy relationship where one is saying, well, I'm like this and I'm like this, and the other's like, I'm like this and I need this, and they can't quite get along. Is there a way to marry these two? And if there is a way to marry these two, or really have them have a happy relationship, what are the ground rules there? What's the new dynamic where we talk about, consumer grade IT that is appropriate for professionals, for enterprise? How do we really define that? And that's what we're going to be talking about in this session.
Well, you articulated it well in terms of kind of the different ways of looking at that issue. I imagine internally, well, you'll be able to tell me how have the internal discussions gone related to this issue in terms of how to decide what's appropriate for what context and how to deal with this consumer grade versus IT sensibility.
Well, yeah, and they're hardly done. I mean, the conversation's really ongoing, and so you're by coming to this, you're really jumping on board a moving train here, and we can further the conversation. But we have at least put some clarity around it. You definitely need to acknowledge that there's some on the aesthetic side that there is some value in having a modern, elegant, beautiful user interface. And you can't discount that, and you shouldn't discount that. Consumer grade means contemporary and fresh and updated frequently, the same way that we see with consumer software. Consumer grade means desirability. Now, professionals often don't get to choose the software that you work for. If you go to work for Pixar, you have to use their, RenderMan. You have to use their software. You don't get to pick whatever package you want. But even though professionals don't have a choice in the technology, or often don't have a choice in the technology they use, you should design as if they do, and still make it that it's desirable, that they look forward to going in and working with the software every day and not fighting with it, etc. There's you have to look carefully at the personas, and why you have to make the interactions and workflows appropriate to the context, and especially to the domain knowledge. That's a really important one. Anybody who knows their domain really should be able to be immediately familiar, even if they're looking at it for the first time. If I'm a great accountant and I know tax software, when I look at Intuit for Professionals, I should be able to immediately recognize, oh, okay, I see where I am. I kind of can work out what I need to do. I don't need 6 months of training to be able to walk me through that. That means that the software has really been designed with that context and with that domain knowledge in mind. So those are some of the things that are kind of emerging as we define what that really means, consumer grade UX in the enterprise.
All right, cool. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me, and we'll see you in Seattle in February.
I love Seattle. I'm really looking forward to being there.
And thanks, Alan.
Thanks a lot.